All right, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to episode 3 of TMV TV. This week I am joined with Jeanine from Palestinian Youth Movement, who recently had an excellent report exposing, we're not going to say lies for legal purposes, let's say half-truths of David Lammy around the exports of arms to Israel. Um, Before we get started, do you quickly just want to introduce PYM, and then we'll go into the reports and the potential consequences of what was said?
Yeah, sure. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you, Abubakr, for having me. My name is Jeanine. I organize with the Palestinian Youth Movement. The Palestinian Youth Movement is the largest organization of Palestinian and Arab youth organizing for the liberation of Palestine from the diaspora, from the far diaspora. We organize in over 20 different cities, including here in Britain, as well as in the UK and Canada. And yeah, our work kind of encompasses a whole host of things from, campaigns, political education and more community work and student work. And so there's like a whole host of things that we do. And this report is one of the most recent projects that we took up as PYM in Britain.
So, just in your own words, kind of, what are the key summaries and takeaways from this report? And then we'll go into the potential consequence of it. But what were the key takeaways about Britain's involvement in this genocide?
Yeah, so this report analyzed Israeli tax authority data. So it was data we were able to access through the Israeli tax authority. And the top lines, there's a few things. The first one is that since the beginning of the genocide on Gaza, the UK has sent thousands of military goods to Israel since October 2024. This includes things like 150,000 bullets and a further 9,000 munitions of war. When we say munitions of war, we mean things like bombs and missiles are kind of included as part of that category. We also found evidence to suggest that the UK is still sending F-35 parts directly to Israel, despite the ban. So in September 2024, the UK government announced that it suspended around 30 arms licenses to Israel, including banning the direct shipments of F-35 parts. But the evidence in this report suggests that that is not true. And it also suggests that the kinds of things that, people like David Lammy, people like Jonathan Reynolds have been saying to Parliament and to the public that, the UK is only sending helmets and goggles, that the UK is only sending defensive weapons. These things are not true. We found 9,000 munitions of war, and munitions of war categorically is internationally recognized as what we would routinely describe as arms. So what this report also uncovered is that the government has been lying to the public about the nature of the things that they are sending to Israel from the UK. And, the government also kind of deliberately shrouds all of this in secrecy. The fact that we had to analyze Israeli tax authority data to be able to uncover this, because the UK itself is so opaque, is a huge issue when it comes to transparency, when it comes to us as constituents, when it comes to us as members of the public. We have a right to know, or we should have a right to know, what the UK is allowing to be sent from here to the Zionist entity of Israel. But instead, we're having to go to Israeli data to be able to uncover that. And so one of the key demands around this report is transparency, and as the UK to kind of disclose its arms shipments to Israel, as well as we're calling for David Lammy to resign, and of course, an immediate two-way arms embargo on Israel. So that's kind of like the top line findings, and also kind of the demands that have come out of this report.
Okay, so is your belief that, and the belief of this report, and I think the belief of thousands across the country, really, that Britain is directly complicit in this genocide?
Yeah, I mean, for too long, I think people have said things like, this is a US Israeli genocide, and the UK has gotten off, kind of gotten away with it in a lot of ways. But actually, and when we talk about UK complicity, what we've been talking about is kind of political cover. What we've been talking about is diplomatic cover. What we've been talking about is this soft power that the UK applies. But actually, what this report shows is it's not just through diplomatic cover or political cover, which obviously makes this government complicit, but it's also through green lighting the direct shipments of military cargo, of weapons, and of weapons components to Israel. And so this is, we have the evidence now to say that this is a UK-backed genocide.
So for a second, I want to focus on the F-35 parts, which is probably the most damning area of this report. I'm sure people know what the F-35 is. It's one of the military jets that the Israelis use, responsible for the bombing campaign. So Lammy has kind of been using this direct kind of wish-washy line. Do you think there's any moral distinction between the two? And do you even believe the claim that if it's indirect, Britain doesn't know that it's ending up with the Israelis, or is this kind of some cover, some legal mumbo jumbo kind of political spin that they're trying to use?
Yeah, I mean, the when David Lammy and the Labour government said that they were going to suspend 30 arms licenses, they made an exception, and they said that, one of the exceptions is that we are not going to suspend the F-35 program because we have kind of obligations under NATO to continue participating in that program, but we are going to suspend direct shipments. And so this research shows that the fact that they said that they were going to suspend direct shipments might not be true, and they might actually still be sending direct shipments to Israel, and that calls that into question. Then there's the second part of this, which is, not suspending the global program. And, we know that 15% of all F-35s that Israel is using to bomb our people, to genocide our people, to massacre our people, are manufactured here in Britain. And so, it's just not good enough that they're saying that, we need to be part of this global program, because of like national security purposes. The UK actually pays money to be part of this global program. So they're actually also using UK taxpayers' money to also be part of this global program. And 15% of the F-35s are actually built here and manufactured here. And without the UK, without our ports, without our airports, the F-35 supply chain would not function. And so, you can't say we are going to suspend these licenses to adhere to international law, except when it benefits our bottom line, or except when it benefits our, accumulation of capital, or whatever that might be. If you are gonna suspend licenses because of breaches of international humanitarian law and international law, then you need to suspend all licenses. And so that's why this research is important, because it kind of shows that even like regardless of the F-35 finding, it also kind of sheds light on this, the UK's role in the global program, and also one of the demands being a total arms embargo, because we know that even if it's indirect shipments, these are still shipments that are ultimately ending up in the arms of the Israeli military and are being used to genocide our people in Gaza, and we don't accept that as people living in this country, and as people that are constituents in this country.
So PYM, released a similar report in Spain previously, and very successfully, a very successful report where, in the end, the Spanish government ended their ports being used for certain shipments and stuff. Are there any lessons that we can take from that as British citizens to ensure that, okay, look, well done in Spain, they've ended their complicity to a high degree. What lessons can we take that from that as British citizens to end our complicity? Is there a way of organizing? Was it the party, or was it just a happy coincidence?
Yeah, I think there's like a few different lessons we can learn. So, the report you're referring to is actually the first report that we launched or released as part of the Mask Off Maersk campaign. So, for those that don't know, Maersk is a logistics company. They're the second biggest logistics company in the world. And the report that Abubakr is referring to revealed that since the beginning of the genocide, Maersk had sent millions of kilograms of military cargo to the Zionist entity of Israel, and these were being shipped through the port of Algeciras in Spain. And when we released the report, we also released a briefing to the Spanish government. Why we decided to do that and why that was significant was because the Spanish government had already enforced or said that they were enforcing an arms embargo on Israel. And so what we showed was that actually Maersk, this global shipping company, this multi-million-dollar company or multi-billion-dollar company, was knowingly flouting the Spanish arms embargo. And so what the Spanish government then did was it said it was going to investigate two ships that were Maersk ships that were coming to the port of Algeciras. They were on their way there. They investigated them. They found that they did indeed carry military cargo, and they ended up turning those ships away. And now they've completely rerouted out of the port of Algeciras. These shipments are now going through Morocco, and we've seen, thousands of Moroccans protest in response to this. We have seen 10 Moroccan dock workers refuse to handle military cargo. And we have seen, 3 trade unions in Morocco basically say that they support their members to not handle this cargo. So I think this tells us that, the important lesson I think we can draw from this is that it's going to take a multi-pronged approach for us to be able to actually enforce an arms embargo. The Spanish government had already basically said they were enforcing an arms embargo by doing research and exposing this route. We were able to hold them to account to their word and say, even though you're saying you're enforcing an arms embargo, what we've proven is actually Maersk is flouting your arms embargo, and hold them to account. And what this means is, even if the government says they're suspending 30 licenses, we can't take their word for it, and we need to be doing the investigative work that these outlets like the BBC are not doing because they have zero journalistic integrity. And so we're taking matters into our own hands and exposing these governments and what they're doing and holding them to account ourselves. The second thing is that even, through doing this work in terms of pressuring governments, in terms of, exposing government complicity, these multi-billion-dollar companies, whether they are arms manufacturers, whether they're logistics companies, they're going to find ways to continue making a killing out of the genocide of our people. And so we need to also be thinking about creative ways to get organized. We need to be thinking about ways we can get organized in our universities, to get our universities to cut ties with these companies. We need to be organizing in our trade unions, to get our trade unions to cut ties, to support workers that might refuse to handle this cargo or might take a principled stance. We need to be organizing in our communities. And so we need to be thinking about, in addition to the pressure we're applying through maybe like the parliamentary approach or through government or through, applying pressure through exposing this research, we also need to be getting organized. And I think, this research actually shows us what is possible when we're organized. We are, as the Palestinian Youth Movement, we are a bunch of unpaid volunteers. We're a grassroots organization, and we were able to do a level of research that actually has now created a crisis in the political establishment. We saw last week over 40 MPs sign a letter calling on Lammy to come to government or to come to Parliament and explain himself. If a group of unpaid volunteers can produce research that really shakes the political establishment of this country to its core, what else is possible if we are organized, if we are disciplined, if we actually take matters into our own hands, and if we are unified in this moment? And so there's a really important lesson here about the power that we have as regular people to stand up and to confront these complicit institutions, and to confront Zionism in all the places that it exists, including in the government.
Yeah, I just want to reflect on a really important thing and about the timing of this report, which obviously the government's been taken to court. A number of Tory MPs now have finally come out in support of Palestinian statehood immediately before all of this supposed negotiation that the Zionist state wants to take place first, and the Labour government keep insisting on. And then really importantly, because they shape the narrative, Financial Times, which actually a decent newspaper, which has been okay on Palestine compared to most, but The Economist, the most vile paper, ultra-Zionist, has even come out in the last few days with an op-ed, with a criticizing Israel with an editorial, not even op-ed, an editorial from their board criticizing Israel, saying that there needs to be change. How can we, as a movement, take advantage of this moment of rare, I wouldn't even say moral clarity. I see a moment where the establishment realizes the level of mistake that they have made, and how do we use that to shift government policy? Because it is a small window, but it is one that we can perhaps take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to be thinking about what power we hold in the places in which we exist, and places in which we live and we learn, and work, and the places in which we kind of live our lives. And so I think what that means is, did your MP, who is meant to represent you, did they sign the letter that called on Lammy to come to Parliament and explain himself? If they didn't, you need to write to them, and you need to say that, as a constituent, you want them to take a principled stance on an arms embargo and to pressure Lammy, and that the findings of this report are really alarming to you. If your MP did sign that letter, Lammy still has not answered to Parliament. Shoka Adam asked him a question today in Parliament, and he completely deflected, and he just had a bit of a tantrum and sat back down. And so, you've signed this letter. You need to be following up and making sure that Lammy is coming to Parliament and is explaining explaining himself. So, we need to be thinking about ways that we can pressure our MPs as constituents to actually disclose, to actually pressure Lammy to resign, to actually enforce an arms embargo. If you're a student, there's a letter that student groups have signed on to. Basically, different student organizations have signed on, endorsing the demands of this letter, and basically echoing the concerns that are raised in this research report. So if you're part of a Palestine Society or an ISOC, you can sign on to this letter to show that the student movement actually stands with the call for an arms embargo. There's a trade unionist letter. So if you're a trade unionist, you can also sign a trade unionist letter that shows that, we refuse the exploitation and the utilization of British labor to enable this genocide. We have been, leafleting outside the FCDO, which is the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, and outside the Department of Business and Trade, and having conversations with workers there and handing out copies of the letter, many of whom are quite alarmed, many of whom did not know that this was ongoing. And trying to think about ways that we can organize in different trade unions that might have the power and the leverage to actually enforce a people's arms embargo. So there's all of these different ways that we can exert pressure, and I think the common denominator under all of these things is the importance of organization and being part of an organization. If you're a student joining an ISOC or joining a PALSOC, if you work joining your trade union, because it's through these organizations that we can build the collective power needed for us to actually take action. So it's really important, we as individuals can make a difference. We can write letters to MPs, and we can turn up to protest, but the actual critical mass that's needed, the collective power that's needed for us to be able to actually exert pressure, for us to actually create a crisis in the political establishment, for us to actually make sure our demands are met, that happens when we're part of organizations. And so the lesson here is to join an organization, because that is how you can actually organize your power and bring all the different voices and different energies and powers together to be able to actually create change.
Yeah, and just to quickly add to that, I mean, we haven't really touched on them yet, but if you have the ability, capability, and most importantly, you're able to take the risk, get involved with a group like Pal Action, because as we're waiting for the political establishment to take decisive action, we also have to take action into our own hands to some extent, and that means that Muslim vote's all about taking the democratic approach. But like Jeanine has said, we need to make sure we take a number of approaches. So the Nakba March is coming up. If you're able to go to the Nakba March, make sure you turn up. Right, that's mass mobilization that keeps the popular support around. But obviously, the parliamentary approach is all about systemic. We can end the arms trade in one go. But whilst we're waiting for that, we can't just sit there every day to the Palestinian and says, "Yeah, I'm trying to lobby my MP." If we can delay any arm from getting to any bullet from arriving at to the state of Israel at any moment, for even if we even delay it for a day or a week, then it is a moral obligation upon us. And Dr. Asim from Cage has a brilliant video explaining this. So this is a moral obligation. It is a human obligation that we, at any way we can, and with any risk that we are able to take, we support those organizations who are doing that work. Before we kind of wrap up and go, I just wanted to kind of reflect on, um, what you believe the strategy needs to be going forward beyond the parliamentary approach. What does that movement need to look at? Because look, we're 15, 16 months into this genocide. Having talked to people who even visited the West Bank recently, um, they're not optimistic one bit. They're very scared. That, to be honest, these are people who've been organizing for years, who just privately have told me they're quite scared about the situation, and they're not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. But as people in the UK, unfortunately, we're not allowed to have that mentality, because we are in the belly of the beast. You're not being killed right now. Worst case scenario, you might end up in a prison cell for 1 to 2 days, right? So how can we continue to organize and mobilize, but in a way that's effective, not in a way that feels good and looks good, but in a way that actually changes policy and disrupts the genocide as much as possible?
Yeah. I mean, I think we need to be really real with ourselves about what the parliamentary approach can do. And I think that, like, it's important. I also just want to note on the back of what you said, Abubakr, that, we don't expose the government or politicians to appeal to them, especially, to the Labour Party, especially to these politicians that have, for since the beginning of the genocide and for generations, showed us that their interests lie with profit, and their interests lie with power, and they don't lie with the people. And so we expose them through research like this so that the whole world sees what we already see. We already see the genocide for what it is, and we already knew that the government was complicit, but now we have evidence for the whole world to see what we see. We expose them so that history remembers what they did. We know that part of Zionist tactics is historical revisionism. They obfuscate narratives and they rewrite history. And so, we release research reports and things like that so that history, there's on the record that they are doing this, and we held them to account, and we expose the truth. And we expose them because in exposing them, we show the power we have from within Britain to actually confront Zionism and imperialism from within the belly of the beast. And like you said, Abubakr, we have a really important role to play. Part of this, this genocide is really being perpetrated on two fronts. The first front is the genocide at home, the genocide in Gaza, that is massacring our people, that is orphaning our children, that is starving our people, a man-made starvation of our people. It is rendering, our young people and old people amputees. It is leaving families completely wiped off the civil registry. This is, one front, and the main front that this genocide is being fought on. But this genocide is also being fought on, or there's a second front that's being fought in the West, through providing political cover for what is happening, through making the genocide possible, through making it normal, through the institutions that exist, that a genocide can happen, and that Western powers are not going to do anything to stop it, by presenting forward some sort of political solution that is actually normalization with the Zionist entity. And we're going to see an increased pressure for Arab states to normalize, and for other states to normalize with the Zionist entity on the back of this genocide. But we also know that the Palestinian struggle has gone through waves of setback throughout our history. My dad was around my age when the Oslo Accords were signed. My granddad experienced the Nakba. We have the 1967 setback, or the Naksa in Arabic. The Palestinian struggle has gone through these moments of setback, and after each one of these moments, the Palestinian people have continued to rebuild. They have continued to rebuild not just kind of their homes and the infrastructure, but also the like Palestinian institutions, also organizations that can continue to propel our movement forward and prepare for the next moment of confrontation with the enemy. And so it's these moments that are between the headlines where we can really build the political power that's needed, so that the next kind of confrontation with the enemy we can engage it in a much stronger way. And so we can't let these moments of setback completely derail us. We can't let these moments of setback distract us, and we can't let these moments of setback deter us from the path of liberation, because it's a path that is not straightforward. It's a path that is not easy, and it is a path that many have tread before us. But we know that ultimately this path of struggle is going to lead us to liberation. And so we need to be continuing to organize and continuing to build in our organizations, in the places in which we work and in which we live and in which we study, to be able to build the power necessary to continue this confrontation in kind of and meet whatever the next moment requires of us.
Yeah, I want to end on this note. Last week when we talked to Michael, who organized in Preston and won as an independent, and I talked to him, okay, look, you campaigned on local issues because of the local election. What lesson would you take for us in the Palestine movement? He said, look, it's very important that when we talk to ordinary Brits, that we connect the local to the national to the international. All right. So for example, Birmingham, like, your bins aren't getting collected. It costs the government a few £1 million to or maybe tens of millions of pounds to end that bin strike and ensure that the workers got fair pay. But instead of the government intervening and helping out the council, they're increasing our defence budget by billions of pounds a year, right? So money that could be flowing into local communities instead of flowing into the arms of arms manufacturers who make a living and profit off people dying. And it's very important, right? Look, as much as I would like to tell people, all you have to do is show the video of a mother getting killed. Everyone has seen the genocide now, and everyone knows that it's morally wrong. But if you can make them understand that, if we can organize on a collective platform of, political liberation, ethical foreign policy, opposing the mass transfer of wealth from the poorest to the richest in society, and connect it all and draw one picture, a coherent picture, then we can truly organize a movement across this country that can not only make the lives of the Palestinians better, but make the lives of people in the UK better. And that's the story that we're obligated. And it's not even a story; it's a fact that we should tell them that it is not the fault of the immigrant, like Keir Starmer would like you to believe, that you can't get access good health care, but is a fact of matter of political priorities. And a government which prioritizes genocide over the truth is not going to prioritize your health. But thank you very much for joining us today, Jeanine, and hopefully, we can get the message out there to millions across this country and continue to organize for a bright future. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.